Isn't it great how everyone in America has always gotten along and never disagreed? Yeah, I didn't think so. The North and the South were very different in many ways. They had a lot of arguments that led up to the Civil War that could have been avoided if both sides had just set aside their differences.
Hate to break it to you, potential farmers, but northern soil and climates aren't the best when it comes to farming. The northern states endure through harsh winters loaded with several feet of snow and ice. Because of its cold weather, the north makes for a poor choice in raising successful crops. These unforgiving climate trends drive agricultural workers elsewhere. People quickly learned that the northern climate is much better suited for industry.
Meanwhile, in the South, the weather was perfect for farming, nice and warm throughout the spring and summer, and the soil was nice and fertile for the crops that the farmers had to grow. But because of this nice warm weather and the fertile soil, the South was a perfect place for the farmers to start their own large-scale farm for crops like tobacco and cotton.
This led to economic disputes. The North's economy, based on industry, allowed them to bring in large revenues. Their economy soared due to rapidly developing technologies such as the steamboat and the telegraph. These were a result of the Industrial Revolution that was limited making working near sticks and lead, leaving the southern states behind.
The South did not advance as fast as the North did with its economy because they did not have as many railroads. Because of this, and the climate, the South focused more on farming than going big with their industrial profits. The South depending on the institution of slavery for their agriculturally driven economy.
So the North was rolling in the dough,
while the South was crying in the corn.
As the northern and southern economies became more diverse from each other, so did their political views. Southerners were very concerned with states' rights over federal government. Up until this point in time, many decisions were left up to the individual state rather than the country as a whole, which gave the state more control over how it was governed. By the 1850s, most major powers like Britain and France had already abolished slavery. Northerners began to feel the pressure. Most were finally convinced that the act of buying and using a slave was morally wrong and violated human rights. This was when the Republican Party was formed by Northerners intent on abolishing slavery. When Lincoln, the Republican candidate, was elected in 1850, he didn't make an appearance on any of the 9 Southern ballots, making him a complete Northern win. The South saw this as a direct threat to their rights, especially when Lincoln made his famous speech saying, "A house divided cannot stand," and promised that America could not endure half slave and half free.
The South did not even care they were violating human rights because they felt as if the slaves were not even human. The Southerners feared that the Republicans would actually abolish slavery. The reason they feared this so tremendously is because the slaves were the people who did a great portion of the work in the South. So when Abraham Lincoln was elected president, the South had decided that they had to fight for their freedom. They were scared at the very thought they would have to compete with slaves for a job, and to lose what freedom they thought they had.
The North knew the South's actions were wrong, so the North looked upon the South and said, "Hello," from the other side.
The South heard them and responded with, "We are never, ever, ever getting back together. So bye, Felicia."
Convinced that Lincoln's election and subsequent laws created with Northern opinions would threaten the way they lived their lives, the Southern states of South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee seceded from the Union. Once news of the Southern states' secession reached the soldiers at Fort Moultrie under Major Robert Anderson's control, they quickly relocated to Fort Sumter, where they believed they would be much safer. On April 11, 1861, Confederate Brig General P.G.T. sent troops to force the surrender of Fort Sumter. The first shots of the war were heard as Confederate soldiers opened fire on the fort at 4:30 in the morning, and kept going for 34 hours straight. Major Anderson surrendered the fort. Surprisingly, no soldiers on either side were wounded or killed, despite the Civil War being one of the bloodiest wars in America.